Hello, good people. Welcome to our show. Hello, bad people. Welcome to our show. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Today we are going to discuss about design thinking in big enterprises. How it's important today to create the right strategy, how to create the right design that will provide great results, and many other things we are going to discuss on this podcast. So stay tuned until the end. You can ask a lot of questions, you can get great answers, and yeah, I'm so excited to discuss a lot more with James Punishill. How are you?
I'm awesome. Chris. If you're not a good person or a bad person, who are you?
Yeah, uh, I think um everyone can say they are good, but let's be honest. Sometimes I'm bad. If I have bad mood, I can be bad. I don't know. Yeah, it's tough to criticize yourself, but I think everyone is good. Everyone is good with own mindset. Uh, so I hope good people sometimes can change mindset to be bad people. Why not? Just it's better to be yourself and to do some legal stuff.
I
So
like to
yeah,
think we're all good, but we do bad things.
yeah.
So
Yeah. Okay, Jeb, before we start, just tell more about yourself, experience, background, and anything that can help our listeners to learn more about you.
so I've got a long career, 30 plus years, mostly in financial services, and it's what one might call a portfolio career. I didn't take a sort of a usual path. I started as a salesperson. I ended up help designing and building the very first online brokerage for Bank of America in the mid 90s because I was 25 and I knew what the interwebs were. That made me qualified. I've been a consultant. I've been an analyst. I've been a general manager of a large product unit. I've been a product guy. I'm a two-time CMO. I've led rebrands at large companies. I've done B2B SaaS. I've done B2C. And now I'm running customer, leading sort of customer experience and, building up some new modern marketing at another large enterprise. So big company, small company, product guy, digital guy, AI guy, marketing guy. I've had a pretty diverse career.
Oh, nice, nice, love it, love it. So you touch all sides
Yeah.
of of this coin. Okay, Jim, let's start about finance. I'm interested about this topic because we can help a lot customers in this niche, and uh, we often get customers, big enterprises who are asking for the right direction. And for example, when I get them, I can check what they have, the benchmark, and I see generic strategy, nothing special, just to they usually analyze competitors and do the same. I usually tell them we don't need to compete with others. We need to find our ways, our strong side, and stick with that. Because, for example, let's imagine I wanna film videos for YouTube. Can I compete with Mr. Beast? He's good with that. So especially in finance, billion-dollar companies on this niche, and for some clients, we got great results from zero traffic to plus 2,000 people a day in extremely competitive niche from scratch with the right strategy. Can you tell your methods? If we are talking about finance, it's important to have trust. It's important to have the right strategy. If you have a new client, what do you usually do? How to start to analyze how you can help and support them?
Yeah, well, usually I'm on the client side, so I'll take the lens from that. I think, I mean, financial services is difficult in some ways because we also have a lot of regulations, and in some ways it's competitive, but not so competitive. Only so many companies can provide, you know, healthcare coverage to 100 million people,
Yeah.
right? So it's competitive in certain ways, but not in others. But the number one thing that they will do most of the time is avoid risk, right, or manage risk. And so think about even how you frame the question. That makes finding those differentiations and doing things different. That's more of a mental challenge for a financial services organization. I don't care how big or small you are, because regulators think that way too. So I mean, I'll give you a great example, and this is years ago, but when the internet first rolled around, um, the SEC couldn't decide how do you regulate an email, because in the analog world, a written piece of correspondence is is monitored and reviewed one way, but a phone call wasn't. So what's an email? Is it the replacement for a phone call and we don't regulate it, or is it the replacement for a piece of written correspondence and we do regulate it? Right? Take crypto. Is it a currency? Is it a transaction lever and a payment facilitator? Is it a form of legal contract? And so I think that's where it becomes a little bit more difficult in some of the regulated industries to move as fast as those of us who would look from the outside say, God, it's so obvious. Why wouldn't you do that? Because it's not so obvious or exactly how to apply those things. AI is a great example of that right now. The large organizations really struggling, not because they don't see it and they don't want to do it, but how do you do it safely, right? And this is just like a big car company thinking about, self-driving versus Tesla. And, we can see, look, Tesla just had to do an, OTA update for every single car, which is almost unheard of.
Yeah.
Right. So it can be a challenge, right? Now a lot of companies hide behind that as an excuse, not to try new things and to experiment. But it isn't as easy always as it appears from the outside.
Yeah, nice. Yeah. And do you usually read or learn these regulations to specific case, analyze what you can implement, what you can't, what is better to avoid? So give some suggestions how to do it right.
Yeah. So go back to my email example, and I realize it's an old one, but it's a really nice, clean one. You asked the question right, which is there precedent? And the answer is actually nobody knows, and that's why they're worried. If we treat it like it's a phone call and we don't monitor it, and then the regulators decide, oh no, you should have done that, you become the very first person or company who gets a fine, and then it's the precedent and we establish the rule. And that's exactly what happened in this case. Some companies decided to take the risk and move forward. They then became the ones who wrote the first check. Now everybody knew what to do. No, but there's a second piece of your question, and I think it's actually, if you want to be a driver of change, and it is where design thinking, I think, becomes really useful. You want to be a driver of change in a larger organization or where you have regulatory, let's call it ambiguity. You have to actually now deeply understand what the regulations are to try to help the lawyers or the compliance people frame and think about the issue differently. So I'll give you another example. I was at another large bank, and we were trying to go onto social media, trying to talk to the lawyers who couldn't even get onto Twitter and explain what Twitter was. And actually, this is one of my favorite stories. We got a call from IT, and they said they wanted us to do a vulnerability assessment of Twitter, an ethical hack, which is what we would do with any of our own software or any cloud provider. And I had to explain to them, we don't actually own Twitter. That's just our page on Twitter, and it made no sense to them. So that's kind of a lot of what you have to do is understand how they think, put yourself in that frame of reference, help them have, give them metaphors and other sort of examples, analogs that help them then get comfortable with this new thing that you're trying.
Yeah, I think Elon Musk doesn't learn any regulations before tweeting. Then he can learn, he can get some circumstances why he needs to do something, So yeah, I understand him because he doesn't have a lot of time, to learn about that. He tweets then when people, I don't know, just tell it's wrong, not right, and then he started to learn what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't want to get into a deep debate about Tesla or Elon for that matter. But it is an interesting thing, right? The Valley has this ethos of break it and fix it. When you do that with cars, I don't know, people might die. So do we really want to break it and fix it? And it's a hard one. It's a good ethos, right? That's how we get things like SpaceX, right? Throw the rules out and take some chances. Do we want pharmaceutical companies doing that? Hey, let's take some chances with and not do the rigorous testing. And so that's always the balance, is because the minute something goes bad, then we all scream and go, oh my goodness, why didn't everybody protect us? And how could they possibly do that? So breaking things sounds great until something goes wrong and we want to, blame somebody for it.
Yeah, nice, nice. Uh, I want to ask about design thinking. Can you explain what it means for someone who is not familiar with that? Because I think people have different levels of understanding, but it's important to understand. I don't know, clarification about this terminology. Yeah.
Yeah, well, boy, I mean, I bet if you asked 100 people, you'd get 150 answers, and I'm not sure mine is any better than anybody else's. But I think the way I think about it, and I've been using early versions of design thinking for, I don't know, 25 years before they were calling it design thinking, right? But I think about it in two ways. In the old world, somebody would design a product, they'd brand it, put an advertisement out, and that was the promise of an experience. Geez, if
Mhm.
you buy a Mercedes, then you will feel awesome and you'll be, cool and whatever. You buy a BMW and you're going to be, like an F1 driver. And there's a long cycle between when you got that image and that impression and you actually purchased the product and experience. And now what's happened is the product is the experience.
Yeah.
So how do you design that experience? How do you have the frame of reference of the outside world and the customer? And to the earlier discussion, how do you start with no rules and then apply rules? So there's a famous design thinking experiment that lots of companies use, where you put raw spaghetti, just pieces of spaghetti and uncooked, and marshmallows, and you
Mhm.
ask a team of people to see how big a structure they can design with the pieces of spaghetti and the marshmallows. And they've done experiments where they put a bunch of 6-year-olds in a room with the same spaghetti and marshmallows as a bunch of corporate people, and the 6-year-olds always win because they don't start with rules. They
Yeah.
just experiment and try things, and they're like, because there's no one way that it should work. But as adults, we start to learn rules and patterns, and so design thinking is designed. It's primarily set to how do we understand really the underlying issues, and the underlying needs of the user, and then apply without rules and parameters, and then start to apply those so we can come up with the right solutions and creative solutions. Go back to SpaceX. Good design thinking says, geez, why do we have to, what are the assumptions? Elon would call it first principles thinking, right? Why do we assume that a rocket is only worth one use? Right,
Mhm.
that changes the entire economics of SpaceX. There's a lot of assumptions when you get into a large company about the way things worked, because they have always worked that way. And so how do you question those and bring in an outside perspective and systematically understand where are the critical moments that matter to do something different, and where's a lot of throwaway stuff that people will say they want it but they don't care really.
Yeah, nice. Love it, love it. Let's talk about strategy. Can you tell your methods how to create strategy before crafting this design thinking, and to explain to others? And let me explain why I'm asking about that. I mean, like, I think it's important to collect data before doing something, to collect data, to analyze the market. And once Jeff Bezos got a research team about a new product, and this team asked him to give more time to analyze this product, the market demands of this product, and he denied. He told, we have enough data. It's enough data to understand. And this product was Alexa. Today, almost all homes in the US have this product, and it's interesting that Jeff Bezos has this intuition to understand it's enough data, and I see when people collect more data, and it might confuse, to create strategy. You don't know where to take. It doesn't matter. It's not only about design thinking. About any strategy, when you have a lot of data, you want to do a lot, but you have limited resources. So tell your methods how to choose the right data, how to collect data, and create the right strategy with design thinking.
Well, I mean, it's an unknowable question. How much is enough? Right, right, because there's both sides of that. On the one hand, lots of companies and people don't collect any data, They do what I love to call navel gazing, right? I like it, therefore everybody will like it, so I'll build it, right? I mean, how many of us have, been forced to change a web page or a piece of design or something because the CEO didn't like it, right? As if he or she is the representative of the customer. The flip side is you can easily, to your point, get caught in analysis paralysis. So I think the part of this is you have to understand what's the risk of failure. And let me give you an example. When I think about taking a new job, or when I counsel people on taking a new job, and actually when I think about any strategy, I always start with, if I'm wrong and this goes sideways, in fact, it goes sideways in the worst possible way, can I live with the outcome? Right? Or what is the outcome? So I had a friend who was looking at a job to move from New York to San Diego. And I'm like, okay, great. You get out there for a year. 40% of new executives don't make it 12 months. Now you're in San Diego. You've moved your whole family out here. You've bought a house. You've sold a house. Can you find a new job in the industry you want? If the answer is yes, take it. If the answer is no, it's not worth it, then the risk was too good. You needed more information. Kind of thing. And I think this is the art there. Sometimes put Alexa out there in the universe. What's the worst that happens? People don't buy it. So we spent a bunch of money. We already built it. We spent a bunch of money. It doesn't work, but we'll learn. That's new data, right? This is the whole principle of lean thinking and MVPs. Get it out there. Get real feedback. Iterate fast, or fail fast and determine you shouldn't spend any more money because you were totally wrong. So the real question is, what is the data you need to commit enough resource to get to an MVP, so then you get real world information, and what are the consequences of real world? Drug development, if you think about it, is this: you spend a lot of years to get to something that's usable to test first on animals, or first on AI, then on animals, and ultimately then on humans, before we send it out to 7 or 9 billion people or whatever we've got. So, you've got to, if you think about that, that's sustained and continuous data collection that says, now commit more resource or go all in. I don't know enough about the Alexa story, but I'll bet that we didn't see the full weight of Amazon behind Alexa until much later. But his intuition was, we have enough to put it out the door and to start to get user feedback and see what happens.
Yeah, nice. Well explained. I remember when Mark Zuckerberg said about the risk, the biggest risk is not to take any risk. So we need to take the risk, but we need to analyze. If we lost, it's part of the job. I lost many times in my life. I started some projects, invested a lot of money, resources, hired a big team, and gave up after 3 years, because I hated Monday. I loved Friday, and we had the goal to fill the market gap. We found this gap, but then when I got it, it's not my passion. I decided to leave. So, but sometimes we can take the risk. I don't know. Probably I could find this passion, during the process, but I didn't. So, yeah.
So much of it is, the older I get, and it's only the more I realize, and this is not useful advice, but except for perspective, how much of it is just luck. You can see things. You can be way out ahead of the market. That doesn't mean it's the right time. Just about anything that any of us think of as great advances, we didn't know that was the moment where the market was ready and it was going to be accepted, and we ignore everything that came before, right? You think about, we talk about Steve Jobs and the iPod or the iPhone. It's not like for 20 years there hadn't been people developing PDAs and MP3 players and smartphones, etc. The market wasn't ready, right? And it's generally not ready until it's ready, and sometimes you just don't know. So you're right, you got to take risks, but as they say, you also have to know when to fold them. That's the hard part, right? Because where's on the one hand, they will tell you, right, stay committed, stick with your passion, don't take no, don't believe the haters, right on through. Sometimes the information coming from the universe is real, right? And sometimes you just get lucky.
Yeah, I agree. And for me, it's not a bad thing if you give up. If you hate it, give up. Everyone can make wrong choice, and doesn't listen when someone can tell never give up. If you hate it, give up. Find something else what you like. To do more. Uh, Jim, I wanna ask how to transfer uh, this information to decision makers, to big enterprises. For example, if you created the strategy of design thinking, you want to implement it, and according to data, many companies implement only 40% of all tips and recommendations. For example, someone paid you, let's imagine, 100K, good money, and you need to help them to create this strategy, to implement design thinking. But it's a big company, many things to do. They need to develop innovate products, to compete with competitors, to update what they have, but they need to start something new, to adopt that they didn't have experience before. So your tips how to do it right, to transfer this data, and to explain importance of implementation.
So, boy, that's a complicated question. But I think the thing that most people who've never worked in a large organization don't appreciate is just how hard it is to do things in large organizations. Right? If you haven't read Innovator's Dilemma, that's the royal you, not just you, Anatoly, but you haven't read it. It's an older book. It's like 1998 or 97 from Clay Christensen, and he describes the problem perfectly, which is successful companies are actually built not to do anything new. They're built to maximize the success they've already had. The whole system is built that way. And so you're literally asking the system to go against itself to try something new. And so start with that mindset. And the second thing is, and I can only say this from, both from my experience on both sides, you have to find the right person that can translate that new thing into something that the company inside can absorb and do and almost feel first before it goes all in. So, a good example of this, when I got to, I was at Citibank many years ago. I actually helped launch Citibank on social media. I go back to that example I was saying about Twitter. That was me. In fact, the very first Twitter account for Citibank, for customer service at Ask City, which I think is still live, it had my face on it because they put my ugly mug because they don't want to put the logo on because they were worried about the risk. So there was less risk of putting my ugly face on than putting on the Citibank logo. But one of the ways that I did that, and we were working with an agency helping us evaluate all the other opportunities, and everybody had crazy ideas about how we would use social media for X or Y or Z. And this is 2009, mind you. This is not yesterday. And what I understood about Citibank that nobody from the outside could understand is the biggest line item, the biggest part of the expense base of the retail business was customer service in the call centers. And so strategically, we decided to start with online customer or social media customer service, not because I thought it was necessarily the best social media strategy or the most innovative, or et cetera. But if I could help customer service using Twitter for Citi, that had a big, meaningful impact inside on the economics. And if I can make an economic difference to the company, then I can go get more budget and they'll try new things. And so some of my crazier ideas, like I wanted to run, and this will really date me, but I wanted to run basically a Black Friday promotion using Foursquare and some of our co-branded partners, so that when you checked into Best Buy, as an example, on Black Friday, we would tell you exactly where to find the Sony Bravia television for $10 in the back corner, as long as you bought something else with your Citibank credit card. It's an interesting idea, right? Early location-based marketing, real-time decision-making, et cetera. But the company's brain would melt thinking about that newness, and we didn't know what people would do. So I could start with customer service that gave me and social media legitimacy and something the company could understand, and that then gave me the right to try some of the other new things. And that's the thing, when you're helping a company think those through, you have to think about where is the new thing that fits closest to the company and will make enough of a difference. Because the minute you make a difference economically, now you have people's attention. Then you'll have the executives' attention. They may not really understand what you're doing, but they understand that you know what you're doing and you have a positive impact on the company, and then they become much more open to some of the other crazy things. You have to almost earn the right to take more risk.
Yeah, nice. Love it, love it. I want to ask more about customer support. And I remember when once I decided to buy a petrol oil. I don't remember where, in one gas station. So I decided to buy gas, and my bank declined the operation. Uh, I don't know why, and it's just like $40, not a lot. Then I called them, and at that time I had only one card in my pocket, and a lot of money on this card, enough more than $40. And yeah, that was tough to achieve them, to call them, and I spent like 2 hours uh, in in this call just to wait when someone will respond. Then someone respond and told me, you need to go to the office. I came to the office. I scheduled this meeting. When I came to the office, they replied to me, we can't decide this issue. You need to call to this special number because only these people can understand. Probably that was fraud operation. Fraud in Shell, $40 for gas, yeah. So then I called to this number, and I wasted like 8 hours to decide this issue, to unblock my card. And and you mentioned about Citibank. I think all banks can have such issues today, not many years ago. It happens today. So tell how to simplify this experience. Okay, if you especially big banks, they can support like million customers. It's tough. I understand it's tough to help all of them, to have big team, but we have AI. We have many things to do today, like AI assistance, other issues. So tell your methods how to simplify this experience uh, for customers.
Boy, I mean, I spent my career trying to attack those issues. So let's start with, why does that happen? That you might not, you think of it, wow, this is dumb. It was $40 at a Shell gas station, wherever the heck it was.
Yeah.
And what you may not know, and I'm making this up, so I don't know it, but let's imagine, is that has been a gas station where some credit card fraud ring has been taking stolen credit cards and spending lots of money. So they flagged the gas station. It has
Yeah.
nothing to do with you. It has to do with the gas station, right? So then you get into the policies. So actually, let me give you, I'll go back to, I feel like I'm picking on poor Citibank, but these stories are so old. Hopefully nobody at Citibank will get upset about this. When I was launching on Citibank, we ended up in a PR crisis because a very famous political communications director tried to open up an account at Citibank. The account was opened. 60 days later, the account was frozen. When he called to find why the account was frozen, they told him it was because his company was inappropriate. The company actually became Fab. You might remember Fab. It was that online retail site. It's kind of cool. But when Jason first raised the money to build Fab, he actually was trying to build a gay social network. Unbeknownst to Jason or anybody else, even at Citibank, 20 years before, 15 years before, when the internet came along, Citi had written a policy that said we wouldn't open up accounts that, were in, the pornography industry or, sort of inappropriate industries. Well, that policy still existed. Somebody looked at his account, saw a blog post, decided that fed into that category, shut the account. It became a PR disaster. He's on Twitter. I'm using press releases. I got 50 people on phone calls. He's tweeting in between my phone calls. So you see, the whole policy is, everything is designed for one world, and the world changed too fast. So it's hard though, because when, Citibank to change its policy, that's 200 million cardholders. And it took me 50 people just to write a press release. In fact, to get a decision to write a press release. So we had to go back and say, let's rethink our entire process, because we can't operate in the social media phase, which now really gets to the answer to your question. And this is actually where design thinking is quite useful. Okay, why did it take us? How did we end up flagging your card? Why? What was the policy? And then how do we get it cleared? And why do we require you to go to a branch to get that cleared? And I mean, there's about 17 different policies and procedures and steps inside of your little universe. but that might require 1,000 people to alter systems, and systems that have been coded since the 1950s. So changing them isn't so easy. So I know it sounds like it should be, this is the most logical, easy thing. When you actually unpack it, it becomes a much bigger thing to change. But companies then have to be committed to understand the process end to end. That's, again, what design thinking should help you. How do I actually understand the entire experience end to end? What is happening and why? Where are the trip points that would cause this to go sideways? How do we make it so that somebody at the gas station, we properly flag it for fraud for the reason I cited, that's been a fraudster's haven, but we then give you the ability to hit your app, say, yes, it's you, it's not fraud, boom, done.
Yeah.
Right? But that, what I just described, might have been a $20 million project to change all of the systems just to allow that easy thing.
Yeah, nice. Love it, love it. I wanna ask about mistakes. In my life, I made a lot of mistakes, even terrible mistakes, slight mistakes. I keep doing them. I don't know how to learn something new without doing mistakes. So I start from best practices, generic strategies. You mentioned about PR, for example. When I started my PR, I wrote a bunch of press releases, pitch all of them, got zero mentions, zero results, nothing. But I learned how it works. Then we change approaches, hired experts who can write for Forbes, Bloomberg. Then we found right tools, learn how to find great journalists, relevant journalists. And today we got great results, mentions on CNN, Dow Jones, CoinDesk, big websites, prominent websites, but by sharing something new, valuable, to know how it works. But I started with mistakes. So I want to ask you if you can list common mistakes in design thinking from your experience that companies can avoid before doing something.
Wow. Well, so, boy, if you, I think, well, let's take the crux of the issue. There is not a single successful person in this universe that hasn't made mistakes. In fact, I will argue the most successful people in the universe have actually made the most mistakes. Just like, the most successful hitters in baseball also strike out the most. They fail a lot. The issue is not making a mistake. The issue is not learning and adjusting and getting better. And so you just have to start with mistakes. I actually think if you even, I hate calling things failures. They're just lessons. So the question is, can you learn lessons fast enough? Right. And, this is a little bit of a side story, but I tell people this in, career and new situations. If you're a baby, and you live in the savannah, you better learn quickly that lions eat babies, because you're going to learn that lesson one way or the other. You're going to get eaten, or you're going to learn to avoid the lions. And so the question, the failure is only not learning the lesson fast enough that it doesn't have, large consequences. In design thinking, I think companies, often make two, the two biggest mistakes are they start with their existing frame of reference and try to work out, as opposed to think about the new frame of reference and work backwards. And so, I like to describe myself sometimes as somebody who I can both elevate my head off of my neck and see the world for what could be with no constraints and possibilities. My real skill or superpower is I can then put my head back on my neck and say, all right, how do I do that inside of this large, complex place that has all kinds of blockers and constraints and limits and other things, and make it apply to here. That's the hardest thing in design thinking, is to take, what looks great on paper, because, communism looks great on paper. It doesn't scale. Libertarian looks great on paper. It also doesn't scale. So that's awesome if you got a group of 150 people. That's not good if you have 300 million people, right? These things do not scale. So if you're trying to build something that scales, just because it looks great on paper doesn't mean that it supports expansion and growth. And so the first thing is, understand that what happens on paper doesn't necessarily apply to real life, and you're going to have to pivot. But the most important thing is to start with no rules and then apply rules. then apply constraints and say, what do we do now? Can we live with it? Can we work around it? I'll go back to the SpaceX example. If you start with, if we could make a rocket that we could reuse, we could totally change space travel and, cargo transport, etc. What hadn't happened in 70 years at NASA or the Soviet or Russian Space Agency or anybody else for that matter was they had the original rockets, for good reasons, were only usable once. And nobody bothered to step back and say, what could we make something that could be used more than once? What an amazing insight that looks so obvious. Now, it might be hard, but that's the key of design thinking, is you're literally looking at the world as it is, you're resetting assumptions, and then you're saying, do those things still apply, or can we adjust? And sometimes they're still there. You have to wait for the technology to get better, right? Streaming video, how long have we been talking about it? Since the early 90s, but until we had 5G and 1 gig fast internet, it just wasn't, you couldn't have the Netflix world. That's why they started with DVDs. They knew they could see the future, but the tech wasn't ready. So I don't know, that comes back to my mistakes, is you got to start with what is possible, then apply it to the existing world, and be smart enough to know when the world just isn't ready.
Yeah, love it, love it. Well explained. And yeah, SpaceX changed the game, to reuse all this the space machines. So yeah, awesome. And I want to ask the question for two people. Second question. The first person, founders of big companies who are looking for ways to learn the basic. From my experience, if I cooperate with founders, co-founders, it doesn't matter, decision makers who know the basic, then we can provide much better results. So, but if they don't, it's tough. It's really tough to explain something, to go ahead. It's like, for example, let's take the topic weight loss. If someone wants to lose weight, they need to understand why it's important to eat healthy food, to train hard, to drink water, because the best experts can't help these people if they don't understand why it's important. I think it's the same with design thinking, with any other niche. So, and the second person, students who are looking for ways to learn from scratch. Considering that we have AI today, we have new technologies, tools. So let's help both founders, decision makers, students. If you started today from scratch without any experience, knowledge, skills, it's your first day in design thinking. What will you do if you started everything from scratch?
Boy, how do I answer that question? I think so. You almost described three people there, right? So, right. I'm the student. I'm just in design thinking. I'm going to start with, a little bit of where we left off. Everything you've learned was all great in the classroom and, in the books and whatever. Applying design thinking to the real world, when you get to real world constraints and human behavior, you just have to know it's all going to break. And this is a little about life. Like Mike Tyson has one of the greatest quotes ever. Everybody's got a plan till they get punched in the face, right? Okay. And the key is, I've got 2 college age children, and the thing that I can most teach them is life is going to punch you in the face all of the time. There is no such thing as not getting punched in the face. And my kids, I grew up with not very much, and my dad was an immigrant and my mother didn't work, and what has been half of my success was just not accepting all the failure and the resistance, etc. It's resilience, right? And fighting my way through it. It wasn't that it was a straight line. My kids have grown up much better than I did in that respect. Nice schools, affluent neighborhoods. So they've started, with such advantage. But guess what? Life's still going to be mean to them too. Having $1 billion doesn't mean life isn't mean to you. So the key is, what do you do? And I think in design thinking, if you come out with these, you believe you've got the answer and the solution and the rubric to solving all these problems that isn't so easy, applying is very difficult. If it was easy, everybody would do it and we wouldn't need any of these people. So that's the first, is failure is more common than not. And it's the art of taking what's possible and making it what's probable or practical. And that means making trade-offs, right? Not everything is going to be perfect. And by the way, not everything has to be perfect. This is
Hmm.
the thing that the design thinkers that get most hung up is they're stuck in the normative. They're stuck in what should be, right? They're stuck in, why do they even flag his credit card at the gas station? They should just let it go, right? Just let it go. Why bother? It's $40. It's Anatoly. He's not doing anything. He's not the fraudster, without understanding all those things. So I think the first thing you got to understand is there's a lot of problems and difficulties. The best design thinkers figure out how to apply them to the world as it is, get the important things through. Not everything is important, right? You can chop off your toe and still live. Blood coming out of your aorta, that's something you got to deal with. And sometimes you got to chop off all your toes so you have time to fix the blood coming out of the aorta. If you're so fixated on the design things that are really your toes, which you don't need, you like them, they're important, but you can live without them, you're not going to live if you bleed out. So for students, I think you got to understand there's way more constraints and practicalities that you're going to have to accept. And the art is to figure out which of those. Founders, I think it's a slightly different problem because they really figured one thing out. Whatever the insight was, whatever the idea was, that was what made them brilliant. That doesn't mean they're brilliant at anything else, but they assume it. In fact, when I was in business school, a professor said to me, become an expert at one thing, and people will assume you're an expert at everything. That is true that they assume it. It is not true that you are an expert in
Yeah.
everything. This is why we listen to celebrities about politics or whatever the heck it is. Why? Because they learned how to act. That suddenly makes them an expert in Middle Eastern politics. So this, I think, is the biggest founder's problem, is they assume because they got something right, that means they can get everything right, and they stop listening. This is especially true in marketing, especially true with things like design, and especially true when you're talking about engineers who came up with some solution. They came up with a solution, and that's great, but that doesn't mean they understand a darn thing about customers or design thinking or how to run a company or scale a company. And so I would tell you, if there's the greatest skill you can ever amass is self-awareness.
Hmm.
Understand what you're good at and what you're not, and how to rely on everybody else. And Steve Jobs gets quoted a lot for a lot of things, but I think actually Steve Jobs is in many ways almost best talent was this, right? I don't hire good people to tell them what to do. I hire
Yeah.
good people to tell me what to do. So now that requires a lot of trust and humility,
Hmm.
right, and judgment to go hire the best people and then learn how to listen to them. And this is where I think more founders get wrong than right. And they don't know that what they were really good at was being a founder. That doesn't mean they're really good at being a CEO or
Yeah.
scaling a company or those kinds of things. Then you get to large companies, right? I think the hardest thing with design thinking is this. Go back to the Clayton Christensen story or the Innovator's Dilemma story I was talking about, which is what makes you really successful in a large. Most people have success in a large company by avoiding risk and not getting in trouble. Um, but if you actually look at people who make it all the way to the top, they took smart, calculated risks and they recovered, whether it was at that company or was at somewhere else. So it's a little bit of a conundrum, right? You can take not too many risks and you can actually rise and do well in a company and get nice bonuses or whatever, but you'll never get to the top. To get to the top, you have to take calculated risk. But again, calculated risk. Go back to, can I recover from it? Is this the right moment? Right? Can I learn fast so it's not a catastrophic risk? It's an acceptable risk, right? Can I actually take this failure here, or this, I shouldn't, not even failure, this learning, it didn't quite work out in this job, and use that actually to get a different job that's even better because I took the risk over here. And that's a very different sort of calculation set. But for everybody, what I would suggest is in today's day and age, just be a learner, right? I was a history and political science major. I started in sales. Then I became a digital product manager. Then I became an analyst. I started in one industry, but my very first report was in an industry I didn't know anything about. And I learned a bunch of other industries. I've worked in just about every sub-vertical of financial services. I've done just about every job except for HR and finance. The more experience I have then really means the more failures I've had, the more lessons I've learned, which makes me much more powerful now. Every job I have, I already know where all the landmines are. I know how to make those calculated risks and how to make those trade-offs. You can only get that with experience and with learning. And usually it's by learning how to fail and recover from your failures and admitting your failures or
Yeah,
defining them. They weren't failures, they were lessons.
yeah, love it, love it. I think Apple still has this policy to hire people who can teach them how to work, including interns. If you open apple.com, you can find this section about interns that they need to teach the biggest company in the world how to work. So, yeah, love it, love it. Yeah, awesome policy. And you mentioned many times about possible. Uh, can we do it? It's possible to do it. We need to calculate this risk. But what about crazy ideas? For example, what I found sometimes we can set up schedule, I don't know, like crazy ideas, like Sony. For example, Sony decided to change uh, division of Japan companies after the Second World War to show that Japan can create high quality products, because all world what that Japan can create only poor quality products. Elon Musk, for example, decided to send humans to Mars. So and many big companies have this crazy ideas to change the world. Uh, and when you see in the beginning, it looks like it's impossible. And you mentioned that it's important to have possible ideas. Can you tell, can we do it or not? I mean, like, to create crazy ideas that looks impossible, but during the way you can change the picture, or probably if you want to achieve maximum, then you can achieve minimum. It will be great too, to get results with minimum. So any tips about that?
Here's the thing. You don't know it's possible. I start with, I like to say that the only difference between insanity and brilliance is outcomes. Every
Mhm.
person who was considered brilliant was first considered insane, and until it was successful. And now, not everybody, by the way, who is insane is brilliant, right? And not every insane idea is a brilliant idea. Some of them will be, but you have to start with insane ideas,
Mhm.
which again they ignore the rules of the world as we know them. They question assumptions. That doesn't mean if you question, by the way, it's true, right? Some things are gravity is gravity. You can keep questioning it, but it's true. Now, if you question, can we do something about gravity? Now you end up with things like rockets. So I didn't change gravity, but I changed my assumption that we can't overcome gravity if gravity is insurpassable. And I can't remember the name of the movie. I'm trying to find it actually while I'm talking to you. But it's actually, to me, it's what it. And this is about design thinking. It's about so many lessons. I will find it and get it to you. You can get it to all
Yeah,
the
yeah.
listeners after if I can't find it before we get off the call here. But if you go back and watch this movie, it's about the starting of a company, I think in 1989, that literally invented almost everything we know about mobility today
Mhm.
back in the early 90s. I suspect most of your watchers and listeners have never heard of it and don't realize that the people who created Android or iOS or the iPhone and the Google phone and so many other things, they all came from this one company that was built in the early 90s that at the time was we didn't even call them unicorns, but they were a unicorn, and they raised more money than anybody else. And they literally assembled maybe the best talent in the Valley in one company that had ever been assembled before or since, and they failed. Depending on how you define failure, back to the earlier conversation, they failed because for so many reasons, and the documentary talks about bad decisions they made, etc. The vision of the CEO, which none of us have ever heard from again since this failure, was he literally saw today 50 years ago. But it wasn't possible 50 or 40 years ago, whatever the heck, 30 years ago. It just wasn't possible. We didn't have the cell networks we have. We didn't have the chips that we have. We didn't have the displays that we have. We didn't have the consumer behavior that we have. And so, the just because you have an insane idea doesn't mean the conditions are ready for it. That doesn't mean that it wasn't right. It just meant it wasn't right now that way. And I'll find it for you because it's such a great example of everything about what they were doing was right. The protocols for email that we use for electronic or sort of over the air email, the first emojis, all of this stuff was created by this company, none of which came to life through that company, but all of those people left and went other places and created all kinds of amazing things based on those lessons and those learnings and those failures. And so, you have to have insane ideas, but you also have to know sometimes, Tesla had, the original Tesla had lots of ideas. He may still be right about air-to-air electricity. It might have just taken us 150 years to figure out how. It didn't mean he was wrong. It just meant you couldn't do it in the early 1900s.
Yeah,
right?
nice. Yeah, James, and I have a lot of questions, but I will ask only one question because we have the podcast limit. And guys, if you have a lot of questions like me, you can follow James on social media. I will put all links, so ask directly, reach out to him. But I have my final question, very important, about AI. You mentioned a few times about AI, and when ChatGPT appealed, I see some people, according to data, 5% of marketers, content creators lost their jobs. But I increase my results with AI. I implement, adapt to almost everything that I have, and I increase. And I think people didn't lose jobs because of AI. I think they lost jobs because someone implemented AI and can replace them, to use this tool. I want to ask you about how to implement AI in design thinking, and from your experience, how to do it better, uh, to the process, to, I don't know, to become better than your competitors.
Oh boy, we don't have enough time. You have to bring me back. I can do a whole session on AI. A couple things about AI. First of all, AI was invented in the late 40s and early 50s, so it did not start with ChatGPT. And there's the first thing: is if you just figured out that AI has arrived, you've missed 70 years of attempts at doing this. The second thing is, I don't believe a single person so far has lost their job to AI in marketing. That's coming potentially, but it isn't. That's just that makes for a great headline. It's just BS. Right now, very few companies are applying AI in any kind of meaningful way where they would see it. They might dream of that, but they're not doing it yet. History suggests every new technology ends up actually creating more jobs and more opportunities in aggregate. And my favorite example of this: you still see people running around with little yellow hats at construction sites with pickaxes and shovels. They were doing that 120 years ago because that's how you dug a foundation. They're still there today, but there's fewer of them. You know where all those people went? They're the ones building the John Deere backhoe. And somebody had to design that backhoe and build that backhoe and service that backhoe and sell that backhoe. So the jobs shifted, and there's more people involved in that ecosystem than there were construction work. In the totality of when we didn't have those. But if you were a construction worker, you might have lost your job, and that's what's likely to happen here. Is we'll see lots of new jobs get created. If you're a marketer, and I literally have a picture of a tech stack I built at a growth company just before I took this new job. I have AI helping with literally every single part of the marketing stack. What that would likely mean not is that I was firing people, but it probably meant I didn't have to hire as many more people, or I was going to actually be able to hire a lot more people because I was making more business impact, but I would be hiring fewer new people than I would have if I didn't have these tools to give me incredible leverage, right? I had a 23-person marketing team at one of my previous companies. We were running 300 simultaneous campaigns in 10 languages in 37 different verticals. How? Because we used AI to,
Yeah.
so, my two writers could produce the work of 20 writers, and we could translate it very easily, et cetera. So I didn't fire anybody. And I actually didn't get to hire a lot more, but I got to do a lot more. And if the
Yeah.
business was successful, I would get to hire more, or I would get more program dollars. So this is one of those, if you're worried that it's going to take your job, you're not adding enough value in your job, and you need to find ways to add value. And ask yourself, right? Is that really, is writing, business content really so valuable? Or is it knowing how to get the AI to write an even better piece of content?
Yeah.
Because the truth is, there's a lot of very mediocre writers or mediocre marketers. And I'll leave you with this stat, especially because I know we're at the end. In 2000, give or take, when we first saw online travel, everybody declared the death of the travel agent. And back then, by the way, travel agents made 95% of their money by getting ticket fees from the airlines. Today, there are more travel agents in the United States of America than there were in the year 2000, the supposed year of the death of the travel agent. Now, they only make 5% of their revenue by selling airline tickets because most of us buy our tickets direct. But then we go to new places and we travel more than ever before. And we need travel agents to help us find the excursions and the experiences in these unique places, which is difficult. Yeah, there's information. So are travel agents gone? No. Are a lot of travel agents gone who didn't make the transition? Possibly, probably, but we still need travel agents. They just now add different and better value than they did before, because there really wasn't a lot of value with them before in giving us airline tickets. They were just the only ones who had access to the service, and so and to the systems. This is going to happen in marketing, and I actually think it's going to be the most profound impact. Marketing is going to change more in the next 5 years than it ever has, bigger than how the internet has changed how we market, and it's going to be AI driven. But that doesn't mean anybody has to lose their job, but it does mean they have to change very much how they view their job and they view their value.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's time to adapt to AI, and AI can help. I use a lot of AI. We translate text with AI. We edit context with AI. And what about quality? For example, if you when we got mentions on CNN, with content that was edited with AI, it means quality, because CNN can recognize the quality. We got traffic from Japan, Turkey, Arabic languages. We don't speak these languages. We don't know anything, but we translate with AI, and then we stop to cooperate with translators. We don't need these people anymore. So it doesn't mean that all translators can lose jobs. They can adapt to think how to scale their jobs, to become prompt experts, to edit results. So yeah, it doesn't work for us.
I actually think we're going to end up with more translators, and here's why. Before AI, you couldn't afford to translate your content, right?
Yeah.
So you didn't, right? So you didn't actually replace anybody because you couldn't afford it anyway. It wasn't scalable
Yeah.
for a small business, right? Now, are there cases where somebody did pay for that, where the 80% version of an AI, because AI is never as good as it will, or rarely does any technology get as good as a bespoke human solution. Rarely. Sometimes it's better, but very rarely. This is sort of like clothes. A $5,000 handmade tailor suit is still better than anything you'll buy off the rack. Is it worth 20 times the cost? That's an interesting question, but it's still always better. The truth was, 5,000 or whatever, 500 years ago, only a few people could afford $5,000 suits. Now everybody can afford
Yeah.
suits, but not everybody can afford $5,000 suits. It is still better to have an in-person meeting than to do a Zoom. But you know what Zoom is better for then? Picking up this old thing and having just an audio call, which is what we used to do. So it didn't stop us from getting on planes. It did stop us from doing stupid plane trips. And it's not as good, but it's way better than what it was. And now we do lots more business and lots more stuff with video, and we still get on planes. And AI will do the same thing, right? It'll replace a few people who aren't adding value, but it's actually going to
Yeah.
make more people like you use translation. And then when this show gets really big, and it becomes more important that those translations are perfect, suddenly you're going to have translators editing those
Of
transcripts,
course.
and right, because now perfection or near perfection matters for you, and you would never have hired those people before. So I actually think it's more, not less.
Yeah, I think we can compete today without someone who can handle or check the quality, because many companies still ignore translations. But when others will jump to this field, yeah, it's better to hire someone who can check and edit to make this perfection. Today, when competition is low, we don't need it. And let me share my life hack how we can do it. We usually translate from English to Ukrainian, Russian, languages that we understand, we can speak. And if we see that we don't need to change anything, then we can translate to plus 100 other languages. So simple.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Although I spent some time in the translation industry, and let me tell you, just because it works, you might work into the Slavic languages, but then work not so well into the, the
Yeah,
character-based languages,
of
etc.
course.
Right? But all that said, again, it's better. It is better that you can translate even imperfectly than not perfectly, because otherwise you'd never get to people in those other languages.
Yeah,
At some point, it needs to not just get better, but to get closer to perfect. And
yeah,
and but that'll still be cheaper for you to do with the AI first and with the editing
of course.
than with the full translation. And that actually means more value for you, more value for people in these other languages than ever before. So it's a win really for everybody. And again, this is every technology. That doesn't mean there's not a lot of short-term disruption, because there
Of
will
course.
be. There'll be a lot of short-term disruption. But that's not a reason not to do it. That's a reason, to our earlier discussion, to learn, to pivot, to grow, to figure out the failure point, figure out your value, be self-aware, and adapt, because the world is changing faster than any of us can keep up with.
Awesome, awesome, love it. Thanks a lot for taking your time, for sharing all these valuable bombs. You lead me to an emergency room. I need to spend time to think how to design thinking what I have. Tell the best way how to keep learning from you, how to reach out to you, how to follow you.
Yeah, right now, LinkedIn is the best way. Just whatever, linkedin.com/in/J Punishill. It's where I'm most active, since Twitter is just not a place to be active anymore, and I haven't really spent enough time on threads, and sort of I view IG and Snap and some of the other things as my sort of, those are my personal zones, not my corporate zones. But if you want to hear those sort of the random musings of an old guy who's got a lot of scars and lessons and hopefully wisdom, LinkedIn's the place to do it.
Awesome, awesome. Yeah, I sent you connection request, guys. I recommend to anyone to follow Jam to on LinkedIn, because you can see a lot of valuable insights. So you wanna get great results, you want to find the right direction, it's better to follow, because it's tough to ask all questions and many things are changing. We need to update what we have. So I love following great people who can lead me to another direction. Okay, guys, love you. See you.